Once again, Ishida has given purpose to his titles, has connected it to the story and put it in the front line. You're probably wondering what I mean by this. When we look at his first story, Tokyo Ghoul, pretty simple title, right? Self-explanatory. But when we move over to Re, it's more so interpretive. Resurrection, return, etc., etc. There's many ways that you can view the word that is Re. But later on within the story, we got a meaning for it. It became a title maker, a tool used to describe this character in a specific light by using his own title, redefining its meaning and giving it a whole new realm of purpose. Re means king, and at that time we were introduced to the one-eyed king that was Kaneki. For us as fans, this was brilliant. We didn't know what Re stood for, so we had our own variation of it, and then we finally got that clarification in a very glorious way. He has decided to do that again, that exact same feeling, that exact same response, but with Choujin X, and this time it has recontextualized the story in a much bigger way. It has framed the prologue that we have just gotten, and the true story of Choujin X is now beginning. Sounds pretty exciting, right? But what does Choujin X mean? Among the Choujin, it is said that once in every generation a single Choujin is born with the power to annihilate an entire world. Curiously, such a being has appeared in every generation, the War Choujin Queen, harbinger of a divided nation, and in days gone by, Bill Morse, the deathless emperor, and Sora Shilha, the blessed beast and hero. Should they be virtuous, they shall serve as a shield of deliverance for the people, but should they be wicked, they shall serve as a blade that will bring forth calamity. And in this trifling prefecture of Yamato, such a being was set to emerge, a being the Choujin world regards with awe and envy, a being they refer to as Choujin X. This is the story of X and those swept up in his tale. These words will now become the architecture that Choujin X's continuing narrative will build upon. It has changed our perspective, our understanding of the story in itself, and more specifically, our two main characters, Tokyo and Azuma. This framework for X, a being that has enough power to destroy the world, has two entirely different outcomes. One of them is death and destruction and annihilation, and the other is savior, someone that could shield the world from this devastation. This would depend on whatever path X wants to go down, whatever way they sway towards, whatever abilities they start to grow into, and how mentally they start to lose control. We have two characters that this represents, which is obviously Tokyo and Azuma, and quite directly, might I add. The beginning of the story played a really nice homage to the Choujin X title itself, with Azuma and Tokyo injecting themselves for the first time and crossing their arms to make an X. I would like to believe that this now plays a double meaning, that both Azuma and Tokyo are the representation of X, or Choujin X, a being that will transcend to something else entirely and either bring forth that said destruction or potentially be its savior. Now, when we dive even further into their abilities, their mindsets, where they are currently, what we have seen, they are entirely different. These are two friends that have grown with each other over so many years, and now they're at a point of conflict. The battle that they've just had has come to a conclusion, but it has revealed some very massive and glaring things, some problems that will lead these very beautiful characters down a specific path. But how it changes and morphs over time is something that's very interesting to myself. It's going to become one of the most compelling reinforcements for you wanting to continue to read the story. What I mean by this is, originally we thought Azuma was going to be the one that would wreak havoc, that when he started to transform for the first time, he was obviously out of control. We don't know what his Choujin ability is, we don't know what he is specifically, but we knew that he was a problem. He had no common sense, he had no morality, he was coherent, but he was emotional. He was within very deeply and drastically his own emotions, so much so that he could not tell right from wrong and he could not control himself from it. This is different to Choujin's going out of control. Azuma was not that. He may not have had control of himself and couldn't wield his own abilities or his own power or live up to that potential that he definitely has, but he wasn't crazy. He wasn't spiraling out of control. He was close. There was one point where he was very close, but ultimately he was saved from it. We thought this was going to be problematic, and it definitely was for a time, but Tokyo changed. He evolved into something else entirely. A being, a beast, the next step in evolution. He had quite literally transcended and shedded any sort of humanity or human self that he had. This is a very big problem for Azuma, for everyone else around Tokyo, and for potentially the world. world. As for what Tokyo turned into, we're not entirely sure, but there is definitely a lot more iterations for it. It was incomplete. It was the first step into that next evolution. Because of this, very quickly we shifted our perspective. There was something wrong with Tokyo. Himself and his ability was morphing in a direction that was humanless, that was transcending but regressing at the same time. The only way that you could get to this point is by repeated death, but at the cost of your own humanity. You would become another version of yourself that is stripped from any sort of human quality. So you can imagine if you continued down this path, if Tokyo continues down this path, he may not be able to come back from it. He may bloom into something else entirely that could quite easily be X, the destroyer of this world, someone that has no humanity, someone that does not care for human life, for himself, for anyone around him, or he could be its savior. He could try to fight that evolutionary process, fight that next step, and to keep control of his humanity, whatever remains of it. But if he is either of those things, Azuma is the opposite. And this is where we started getting into the kind of duality of both of these characters that Tokyo and Azuma very beautifully have. Azuma is not the crazy out of control monster that we originally thought he was. He is a broken emotional individual, someone that has no self-control within his emotions and is now going to be taught how to control it, how to face it, how to wield it. But one very simple thing that frames this entire duality with their characters is that Azuma's seen himself as a hero and Tokyo's seen Azuma as his personal hero. So within this fight, they are no longer connected, as Azuma is no longer his personal hero, as Tokyo has moved far beyond out of Azuma's reach and Azuma needs to play catch up. This is so much of Azuma's identity being someone else's personal hero that even his Choujin ability is morphed around that same idea. He's a tragic hero, a fallen hero, a corrupt one even. The cloth that masks his face and all of his painful emotion also serves as a cape, and the way he's depicted while moving around is that of a hero. But as of yet, he is anything but that. So with this context, we are at a crossroad. Both of these individuals, Tokyo and Azuma, could be the Choujin X, could be a being that destroys the world or a being that saves it. But if they are both potentially Choujin X, if they are both the individuals that will clash with one another, who is who? Does Tokyo continue to transcend, becoming Choujin X in itself, bringing all of this death and destruction within his wake because he no longer has humanity? He can no longer control himself, and his friend, his own personal hero, Azuma, is the one to save him? Or does Tokyo fight that transcending nature and hold on to his humanity to conquer it, to master it? And Azuma is the one that can't control himself, that ends up spiraling out of control and becomes Choujin X, and Tokyo trying to be the one to evidently save him. As you can see, we have built a very beautiful dynamic, a very powerful relationship between these two that play complete polar opposite, yet the story gives you so much. The title explains so much now, yet we still don't know who is who. The point of conflict between them is ever changing as they evolve and grow further, as their emotions, their mentality weaves between one another. It will evidently become a lot more clearer. Yet to truly put our thumbs on it is a hard thing to do. To truly understand what these characters are going to become is impossible. But what we do know is that that conflict is going to be absolutely incredible to indulge within. Their relationship, their growth, how they contort and weave around this idea of their own identities. It's going to be nothing but absolutely glorious. It's pretty crazy to myself that the most recent chapter kind of claimed everything prior to be a prologue, that this was all just set up for the story to come. And we pretty much have everything at our disposal, all the building blocks in place to see a much grander picture. We have ulterior motives, we have beings that are very scary, like the mother, for example, or the random individual that gave these powers out to begin with. He is approaching Azuma and the mother is looking for Tokyo. So both of them are on entirely different sides from one another, traversing down completely different tracks, but will ultimately intertwine at some point, will ultimately connect, and will ultimately clash again. Where they stand, however, within themselves and their own identity is going to be entirely different. It's something that I look forward to, something that I'm very excited for, especially with all the offhanded characters on the side waiting to see where this goes, how they're going to aid Tokyo and aid Azuma. I would say at this point currently there is no better time to read Choujin X. There is no better time to catch up and binge through all 24 chapters. This newest one was beautiful, it was powerful, it recontextualizes the story, it shows that Azuma wasn't this big bad villain that we might have misplaced him for. before. He's going to be trained, he's going to be potentially alongside Tokyo, but their friendship is no longer going to be the same. It might be a little bit different. There might be a little bit of uneasiness there. All I know is that Choujin X as a story begins now. Now that we know that these two individuals are going to transform and grow into very beautiful individuals, very powerful, very prominent, and very conflicting. I for one am very excited to see where they go, what their journey provides. Ishida is a brilliant author when it comes to the duality of his characters, their relationship, and how much they coexist within one another. If you haven't read Choujin X, if you're not caught up, maybe you're a handful of chapters behind, maybe you're just waiting for the time to be right, this is your sign to go and read it. The time is right now. Even though these chapters do not release on a set schedule, they release whenever Ishida wants to do it, and I can even more so promise you that you will get a story that Ishida wants to tell from start to finish with no bars hold whatsoever. He is writing it at his own pace, avoiding burnout and being as creative as possible as he wants to be with no restriction. Because of that, we will get a story that he wants to tell, and a story that we will most likely all fall in love with. Go and read it, go indulge with it, you won't regret it. Now is the best time. With that, however, I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe, I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you within the next one. Goodbye.